So when we commit our restaurant changes and redirect to the detail page, we'd like the detail page to show some sort of message like restaurant saved. So how can we pass along information from this edit page to the detail page when the detail page is made using a separate HTTP request? Well, one way to do this is to include information in the request itself. So somehow encode the fact that there should be a message by passing a parameter in the URL or in the query string. Right now we're passing the restaurant ID in the URL. But if I were to add some other property to this anonymous object, like message equals true or message equals in some string, ASP.NET Core would also look at that property and say, we need to pass this information along. And if that information doesn't fit into the URL, because the edit page isn't asking for that sort of information in the route like it is for restaurant ID, then ASP.NET Core would take that parameter and put it into the query string. So passing along information in the query string, that's certainly one approach we could take, but we would have to be careful that the user doesn't bookmark that page at that point. Because when they bookmark that page, that information or that flag will be included in the query string, and the detail page will still display that message, even though the user has not in fact just created or edited a restaurant. What we really want is some temporary data to say, show this data for right now, but forget about it in the future. And in fact, ASP.NET Core does include a data structure that's available to us named temp data. Temp data is a bit like a dictionary of key value pairs, so I can walk up and index into temp data, and I can say, I want to place the following information into temp data. With the key of message, I want to put an object in here which is a string which says something to the effect of restaurant saved. And if we wanted to get fancy, we could have instead place this call to temp data inside of the if and the else and say restaurant updated or restaurant added, depending on which action we actually took. But let's make this simple and just say temp data message equals restaurant saved. And as the name implies, temp data is truly temporary. On the next request to this application, any page in the application can look into temp data and see this message and pull it out. But after that, the temp data will disappear, so we don't have to clean this up. We're simply putting some information in for the next request, for the next page to show, and then that temporary data will disappear. Now the only question is, how do we display this inside of the detail page? One way to do this would be, let's say, at the bottom of the detail page, to add a statement to say, if there is temp data sub message available, then let's show a div with some information inside. That's one approach, but it turns out in ASP.NET I can also bind to temp data, which is very interesting. It's a little bit of a cleaner approach. So inside of detail, the page model, in addition to the restaurant output property, I want to create another property of type string, call it message, and then place the attribute on this called temp data. When ASP.NET Core sees the temp data attribute, it's going to go into the temp data structure for me and look for something with the key of message, whatever this property name is. If it finds a value for that key in temp data, it's going to take the value and assign it to this property, assuming the types match, which in this case they should. And so now inside of our markup, this can be a little bit cleaner. I could say if message is not equal to null, and of course I have to go to model.message to reach into my page model. And I also have to make sure that I spell message properly with the proper capitalization. So if we have a message, let's display a div and give this a bootstrap class of alert dash, let's call it info, and just include model.message, whatever we pulled out. Let me save all my files. Let's come back and go to all of our restaurants. The application restarted, so we lost Mancini's, but that's okay. Let's just edit an existing restaurant. I can change the cuisine, click save, and I can see now my message appears, restaurant saved. That would probably look better at the top of the page, but I'll leave that as an exercise for you to try. But I also want to point out, if I refresh the page, my temp data disappears. So if the user were to bookmark this page after editing or creating a restaurant, they're not going to come back to this page using that bookmark 3 months from now and see that message and start to worry that they just modified something in the system. It's temporary data and it's now gone.